the main problem of the addiction that got us into the recovery journey in the first place is not the deepest problem. It's not the problem, as we sometimes say. It is, in fact, a symptom of deeper issues. When you can get to the place where you know that there are deeper emotional and spiritual issues, and that the way you've been coping with some of the pain and so forth in your life is by sexual acting out, and you know that that's a symptom of the pain, then you're kind of ready to enter, I think, stage 2 of recovery. And now you're looking at, with greater freedom, because you're not as worried about, acting out or relapse or slips, because your sobriety is more solid. Now you're going to turn your attention to the deeper spiritual issues and deeper emotional issues that are a part of the recovery journey.
Welcome to the Faithful and True podcast. Today we're going to feature part 2 of a 3-part series that's a legacy podcast with Dr. Mark Laaser and myself. Today we're going to continue our discussion of the journey of recovery. And in this podcast you will hear Dr. Laaser reference the Exodus as a comparison from the Bible. We hope that this podcast will be beneficial to you. And here now is Dr. Mark Laaser.
Today we are continuing our short series on the journey of recovery, and today we are on session number 2, which is about the second stage. Sometimes recovery is referred to in stages, the journey is referred to in stages, and last week we talked about stage 1. We'll review that here in just a second, but today we're going to talk about stage 2 recovery.
Well, Mark, I think we're off and running with this series, and as we were talking in our post-production meeting, I just think that this subject is one of great interest to a lot of the men out there, and knowing that their wives, in many cases, are also listening to the podcast, I think it's really valuable information for both to be hearing.
One of the things that's, I don't know if this is a good analogy or not, but I do think that anytime we're facing into some kind of change in our life, some kind of thing that needs to happen, and it always, I think, is reassuring and comforting to know that there is a process, there are stages, there are certain things that we can expect, and that when we know those things, when we get educated about those things, I think it kind of makes the unknown a little bit less frightening. The analogy that I was thinking of is that, and this is, intended more for the wives, I think, obviously, and you'll see why here in just a second. But Debbie and I were part of one of the first generations where the fathers were allowed to be in the delivery room when we had our babies. And prior to that, as we all know, the fathers would sit out in the waiting room and be nervous and anxious until someone came and told them about the birth. But I was, present at the birth of all 3 of our children. But in order to do that, we had to get educated. And part of the education was about the process of delivery in terms of what was labor like. And labor has stages, which is where the analogy comes from. There's this and that and this and that stage. And, various parts of the stages are incredibly painful or whatever. And I just remember thinking that knowing what was coming, or knowing that, a fair amount of discomfort, pain, or whatever was going to be a part of it, at least helped Debbie to tolerate it. And so it doesn't make the pain less. It just means that it was not shocking out of the blue. It was not frightening in that way, and it was a normal part of the process. One of the things we're trying to do here is help our listeners know that there are elements of a journey that are a normal part of it.
Well, I think there's also a secondary benefit there, is that by being pre-educated about the process, puts the husband in a better condition for when he is observing his wife struggling or going through pain or whatever. If you hadn't been prompted in advance that here's the stages that you're going to observe, you could probably jumpstart some real panic in the husbands if they haven't been told what to expect.
Well, that's exactly it. I do remember that, but I think we should leave that analogy. Debbie doesn't, think, well, what are you doing talking about labor and delivery? Because, in fact, you were just kind of standing there, but.
And yet you've been delivered. I don't know. Make sense out of all of that.
Yes,
would you?
I know. I'm just trying to have an analogy that maybe the wives listening might relate to. But all right, last week we talked about the fact that stage one of the journey, and we're talking now about coming out of the bondage and slavery of addiction. We're talking about having lived a life that is full of unhealthy coping behavior, including addiction, and that in a way that addiction and all of that coping, that's become normal. And we were bringing up the biblical story of the Jews coming out of slavery in Egypt, and for several hundred years their normal status had been to be slaves, and for Moses to come along and God finally to help deliver them out of that land of bondage. There was parts of it that were just really unknown. It was unfamiliar. It was something that they were not used to, and there was a large part of a lot of those Jews coming out, facing into the Red Sea and all of that didn't really trust that God could deliver them out of this in an ongoing way, and wanted to at times even go back to Egypt because slavery was what they knew. So we talked about the fact in stage one that this very first period of months can be kind of like a roller coaster ride. There's going to be ups and there's going to be downs. There's going to be a lot of new unknowns. There's a lot of things to experience. It's not always going to feel great. There's a lot of things shifting. There's been a lot of loss. There's probably been consequences. There are relationship disturbances, and the first year of recovery is often referred to as chaos, and it's not always pleasant. It's not always fun. And there again, we go back to the idea that, if it's not always pleasant and fun, we think, is this in fact the right journey to be on? And there's a lot of temptation to go back to normal during this phase. And we know that this phase, on average, for the average addict, lasts about a year or so. I mean, that's a rough round number, but that is kind of stage one. And basically, where we're leaving off our biblical story here is that the Jews in this first stage they're now across the Red Sea. They're now in the desert, and they're coping with not really knowing, necessarily what's going to happen next. And, it's an ongoing exercise in learning how to trust God to provide. All we're saying right now is, I say all we're saying, I say that too much. But this is significant that I think sometimes the average Christian expects the journey of deliverance or recovery to be a whole lot faster or a whole lot quicker or a whole lot more immediate than what it actually is. I mean, when we make the decision to give up sin, to give up addiction, that just begins the journey of being able to give it up and stay given up, if you know what I
Dear
mean.
Lord,
stay surrendered.
Dear Lord, won't you please heal me quickly?
Well, exactly. And so it's again going back to the idea that if we normalize the fact that this is sometimes a much slower process, does have its ups and downs, does have its pains and discouragements, and all of that, does have its temptations to create new false idols. I mean, like our biblical story, sometimes when you give up one addiction, you're still in a lot of pain and you're still looking to cope, and you may turn to a false idol, which is what another false idol, like you may start to eat, or you may start to gamble, or you may start to drink, or whatever it is. And we have to remember that there are a lot of temptations out there to medicate the pain and this recovery is a lot broader than just the primary thing that we gave up in the first place.
That's for sure.
We need to talk about stage 2. What happens when we get to stage 2? And the reason I think it's a segue is that at some point there's going to be kind of a fork in the road where we either continue on our journey of recovery or, like is represented a lot in our story of the Exodus, there's always that temptation to go back to the land of Egypt, the land of slavery. And the basic doorway into stage 2 of recovery is when we get to kind of that 1-year mark, and we know that recovery or sobriety or sexual purity is a lot more firmly in place than it's ever been. And this is going to sound strange, I think, particularly to some of our listeners, but it's where we recognize that the main problem of the addiction that got us into the recovery journey in the first place is not the deepest problem. It's not the problem, as we sometimes say. It is, in fact, a symptom of deeper issues. When you can get to the place where you know that there are deeper emotional and spiritual issues, and that the way you've been coping with some of the pain and so forth in your life is by sexual acting out, and you know that that's a symptom of the pain, then you're kind of ready to enter, I think, stage 2 of recovery. And now you're looking at, with greater freedom, because you're not as worried about acting out or relapse or slips, because your sobriety is more solid. Now you're going to turn your attention to the deeper spiritual issues and deeper emotional issues that are a part of the recovery journey.
Back to, I've heard you say from time to time, it's part of, it's a problem, not the problem.
That is right, and that's an old classic statement by one of our counseling mentors, Virginia Satir. And it would take a long time to get into all of that. And I know sometimes, what we just said could be a shocking statement, because let's face it, when an addict has been sexually acting out and doing all these egregiously sinful things, I mean, it is a huge problem. I mean, it creates havoc, it creates destruction, it creates consequences, it creates a lot of pain. So it may sound kind of hard to hear that it is a symptom of the problem. So in other words, it's still a problem, but it is not the deepest problem.
So we've rather established then what phase 2 is all about. What is your recommendation to help men who are listening to get through this second phase?
Well, the second stage is actually, I think, a stage of growth. It's a stage of practicing. And it's practicing meaning that, in the first year of our recovery, we're going to learn a lot about recovery tools, making phone calls, going to meetings, going to counseling, reading, journaling, praying, spiritual disciplines. And we're going to know that all of these are inherently an important part of our program. The accountability networks that we need to have in place.
The truth-telling that is brand new to their lives.
The truth-telling that is all a part of it. Now in year 2, we can continue to practice all of these tools which we've started to use. And as a result now of the addiction not being the main focus, we can focus on the deeper spiritual issue, which is growing in dependence on God and growing our relationships. I think there is a lot about stage 2 recovery, which is about growing our relationship with God and growing our relationship with others. And we're practicing things like honesty and being people of integrity and doing the things we say we're going to do and not doing the things that we say we're not going to do.
Well, it's so interesting because as you outline these stages, you start to realize why this isn't a quick fix.
Well, yeah, it is a journey. It's really, we're talking about the fact that it's a lifetime journey. But I want the listeners to hear that stage 2, both for both for husbands and wives, is a time of growth. It's a time of relationship healing. It's often a time in which we see repair made to some of the consequences, like financial consequences are somehow repaired. Relationships with others are repaired. We're having honest, open conversations with our children and with others in our network. For those of us that have lost jobs because of our addiction, maybe it is we get reemployed, or we move on to the new kinds of work that God has intended for us. So we sometimes refer to this second stage of recovery as a stage of growth and repair and practice. So that's one of the ways to look at it. And as such, we also happen to believe that it's really involved in the second and third year of our recovery journey. So if chaos and this surviving, the change is year one, coming out of bondage is year one, all the confusion, all the stuff, then year 2 and 3 is a year of growth, repair, and new relationships.
Certain degree of healing.
A lot of healing going on in the second and third stage, or the second and third year.
Right. I believe Aaron had a question for you.
Yeah, we talk about triggers a lot on the show, and I'm wondering, in the recovery process, when can we expect or hope that the triggers start to be less intense and maybe less frequent? Is that something we can expect? And if so, like when usually?
One of the sayings we have around here, Aaron, is that triggers are the gift that keeps on giving.
Just when you don't think that they can affect you anymore.
So in other words, triggers never stop. Triggers are, all of those things that we talk about on the show from week to week to week to week, that we're never going to avoid them. Sometimes we think successful recovery is avoiding all triggers, but the world is so full of them that there's no way to avoid it. What I'm saying is that in year 2 and 3 here, stage 2 of recovery, we learn more successfully how to navigate triggers, how to talk about them when they come up, how to reach out for help and support when they come up. So in other words, part of the practice and the repair and the growth is that we're even looking at the triggers as a reminder to us of the fact that we need to get lots of accountability, help, and support. So I used to look at it that in the old days, back, my addiction days, when I got triggered, I just kind of went out and acted out. And as I matured in recovery, the amount of time it took me to deal with a trigger just kind of decreased. But part of the work of stage 2 is to own your own trigger and to make sure you have enough resources to deal with them as you continue to grow and so forth. I do want to bring it back to our biblical story, because I think it's really in those first couple of years in the desert that the Jews are first challenged by Moses that God is ready for them actually to go into the promised land. There's a story there that basically shows up in the book of Numbers, the end of chapter 12 and the beginning of chapter 13, where, if you'll remember this, most people know this story. At this point, there's been some organization, and the Jews have been divided up into 12 tribes, and Moses assigns a spy from each of the 12 tribes to go from the desert, cross the River Jordan, into the land of Israel, and so that they can kind of observe and get an idea of where they're going. And the 12 guys come back, and 10 of them are really, really, really discouraged. They are basically telling, Moses and the assembled crowd that, yes, it is a land flowing with milk and honey. Yes, it's a great place. And there are lots of giants up there. And we're going to get eaten alive. We're going to get swallowed up. We're not going to be successful going over there. And what I find amazing is in the opening of chapter 13 of the book of Numbers, at this point, the people even want to fire Moses. I mean, they basically say, let's pick a new leader. Here's a guy that has been with God, seen God. God told Moses his name for the first time, and the guy's led him out of Egypt. I mean, done all the successful things, given them the 10 Commandments, gotten them organized. This leader, I mean, the Jews want to fire him, and they want to go back to Egypt.
What have you done for me lately?
Well, that's exactly it. And, the reason I bring up the story is that it's just to emphasize that even in stage 2, we've got to stay the course. We've got to continue to have faith. Who is it that in this story we like? Well, it's Joshua and Caleb, because of the 12 spies. They are the two that they basically say, both of them, that we can go into the promised land with God's help. So one of the things that I wanted to emphasize about stage 2 is that stage 2 is where we are continually learning how to depend on God, to trust in His provision, His guidance of us, and that it's also where we develop a vision for where we want to go. We get a picture of where we're going to go. Now, sometimes that picture can frighten us. You say, how in the world can we ever get there? There's nobody that wants us to go there. The enemy's over there, that kind of thing. And I'm saying in stage 2, this is where we have learned to, have healthy dependence on God, a healthy dependence on our brothers and sisters in recovery. We're continuing to seek the Lord, and we're growing and maturing and repairing all of our relationships, and we have something very much to look forward to, which is going to be in stage 3 when we get to the better places that God has intended for us.
Thank you for joining us today on the Faithful and True podcast for part 2 of The Journey of Recovery, a legacy podcast featuring Dr. Mark Laaser. We hope that these podcasts are helping you reach a new understanding of maybe the issues that you are struggling with. And if so, we invite you to visit faithfulandtrue.com, where you'll find many resources. You'll find over 400 podcasts like this one, and you'll find the access to our Men's Journey Workshop. On our website, you can read all about that event, and also the online registration is available to you. We offer you this 3-day event every month, so we hope that you'll seriously consider registering and attending the Men's Journey Workshop here at Faithful and True. Until then, we hope that this coming week will be a week for you that is filled with many blessings and with great vision.